We're going to have Ayesha Seldon as a guest. Hey, hey, hey. Looks like Ayesha has just joined. Awesome. Let me get you up here, Ayesha. Perfect, perfect, perfect. There we are. Alrighty. Alrighty, let's get you there. Let's see, see. Perfect. How are you?
It's going well.
How's it going?
Good morning. Well, good morning. Good morning, my time. Good afternoon, your time.
Right. Yes, good afternoon, my time. Now, wait, are you in your fabulous home?
It is. That's one of the pieces. This was actually my first original that I bought. She's gonna move locations, but I let her live there for a little while. But that was my first piece.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
Thank you.
I love it. So thank you, of course. And thank you for joining the conversation. I am actually in a hotel lobby because my room is not ready just yet. I just got to Miami for the weekend. So you all will have to excuse some of the background noise, but we're going to have a good conversation today, y'all, because I see everyone floating in here because the Ayesha Seldon, queen of Twitter, queen of IG, queen of all things, fancy and owning shit, has joined us. And so I want to dive into so much of what you have been preaching and evangelizing over this last few years online, Ayesha. You have been this incomplete sensation. I know that me and my circle, we've been following your work for a number of years, and just really excited about your no-nonsense way, particularly talking to the Black community when we think about the upper hand, really talking to us about owning shit. Can you talk about what spurred you to really get online, start having very honest, candid conversations and providing this idea around real estate and investing overall?
You know, first of all, it's interesting to hear you and others say that I have a new nonsense approach. I think I'm like a teddy bear. I think I'm like so sweet online, and apparently I'm not. But so I mean, ownership for our community is especially important. I mean, I think that at some point in my adult life, early on, I came to the realization that for Black and brown people, Black people especially, that help is not on the way. Right? You know, we can talk about all the reasons why we are where we are from an economic and financial standpoint. I mean, we all know what the wealth gap looks like, right? We know that Black Americans have on average roughly 1/10 of the wealth that white Americans. And we can talk about all the various reasons why that is, right? It's systemic racism. We can talk about redlining. We can talk about all those things, but the reality is once we come to the realization that help is not coming, the question is then, okay, so now what, right? So what do we do about it? What do we do as individuals? What do we do for our families? And then what do we do for our community as a collective, right? Obviously in wealth building, there's a heavy emphasis on individualism. But the reality is if our families and our communities are suffering, we all lose, right? So it dawned on me that it wasn't just enough for me to be individually wealthy, right? You know, and that's when I grew up professionally, I became a licensed stockbroker directly out of college. So 22 years ago, I started working as an advisor, started building wealth, and started and saw a lot of success. I hit a net worth of $1 million, I think like right before my 30th birthday. And it kind of dawned on me that the circles that I was in, the other wealthy circles that I was in especially, nobody looked like me. And that for me was problematic, right? There are some people who, they want to be the only Black or brown person in a room, which I think is just completely, it's bizarre,
which is the
right? It's really wild. So I started thinking, how can I, I've figured out a formula that is working for me. And I also knew that, especially in Philly and markets like Philly, like Baltimore, Cleveland, Detroit, I knew that there were other markets that were very much like Philly, where you could buy land, you could buy properties really cheap. And I'm like, okay, if I've figured out a formula that works, what better way? And social media is great because what better way to be able to disseminate and spread that information And while I was buying properties in Philly for 6,000, 7,000, 10,000, 50,000, I was extremely vocal about telling other people exactly what I was doing, where I was buying, what my numbers were. Y'all would see me in houses that had no roof, no back, no floors, nothing. Um,
Like the Jumanji house, I think
No, I got a lot of Jumanji houses. So I mean, that's Philly. When you got poverty rates that high, if someone's not paying their $300 taxes, they're not fixing the plumbing either, or they're not fixing the roof either. So a lot of these communities haven't seen the investment, and that was also important for me. Like if we're going to invest, I preach very heavily about reinvesting back into our own communities. Black flight is
right.
Black flight is real, and I get it. I'm not knocking anyone's decision, particularly parents who've got the need for good school districts, but reinvesting back in my community was extremely important for me as well. So that all kind of culminated into the social media pages that you see today, where I preach equity, I preach ownership. Because I firmly believe that if we don't figure this out individually and collectively, no one's going to come and help us figure that out.
Right. And I think that was what was so captivating about many of your Twitter threads on this topic. I'm such a huge believer in, policy also helping to shape the experiences of people boosting themselves out of poverty. And I think following your work and even reading your book, Mud to Millions, it really put into my mind about, yes, there is no one coming to save us. And here are the very specific conversations we should be having as a collective, as a community, and even within our own families about a strategic approach to how we build our futures. And so when I launched, Upper Hand, the future of work for the rest of us, I specifically talked about not knowing how to negotiate my salary and negotiate my stock options, and just being kind of in an environment where we didn't have a lot of money conversations at home. And as much as we're telling people to go get all this training, all these certifications, go get into tech, the other side of that is, what is the wealth building strategy for us at any stage of our education or our skill building to go and get more higher earning jobs that the future is going to hold? But that tactical side of the money component is really where folks like yourself are really preaching, like, we've got to learn how to do this to survive. Especially in this world of inflation. The world is obviously very crazy right now, even down to student loans and how that all comes together. Can you talk a little bit about even just your book, Mud to Millions, and sort of what you've been hoping to really teach people as we are making these kind of preparations to learn or unlearn, bad financial habits.
When it clicked for me that without economic power, we have no power, right? And we know we've got spending power, right? I was just reading an article that talked about Black spending power. Essentially, since 2000, it's gone up exponentially, right? So we know we've got the spending power, but until we figure out how to reinvest that back in both our communities, in our retirement plans, until we see our individual and collective wealth increase, we will have no political power, right? When we think about why don't we have any of the the powers that some other Americans have, right? Non-Black Americans have. It's largely because we have no economic power, right? So I started thinking, if I can just get enough of us, and again, I'm just one person out here, talking about how I built wealth and how others can follow a formula that's similar. There's no one way to do this, right? My way may work for me. It may not work for everyone. But I at least understand and fundamentally recognize that we grossly underestimate the power of being surrounded by wealth-minded people, right? Most of us didn't grow up or see very many people who look like you or I, either in financial services, in personal finance, owning dozens of properties. Like, I remember I was a kid, Mr. Mitch was our landlord, and he was a white guy. And that's what you expect. Like, all my other friends, their parents' landlords were white guys. So, we never had that representation as kids. So it was important for me to not only just talk about what I was doing, but actually just show what I was doing. Because representation absolutely matters. So my book, Mud to Millions, I talk, it's a very quick, because I don't like long self-help books. Like, I can't do it. Like, I love fiction books, so reading self-help books that are 300 pages of saying, the same thing, like, over and over again, it's kind of challenging. Yeah. Yeah, like, no, you could have covered this in 5 pages, bro. Like, why do we belabor this? So I made Mud to Millions to be very clear, very concise. I made it to be written for us, by us, right? I just recently, I've got a newsletter out. We're in week 5 of it. And I want it to be very relatable for us. So I'm writing this newsletter, the first 10 weeks of the newsletter. It drops every Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern. But the first 10 are based on Big E's 10 crack commandments. And these are the 10 stack commandments. And we basically, myself and my team, Bethany and Byron, we basically created, utilizing each of those steps that Biggie talked about, and just completely converted it into wealth building strategy. So it's very applicable for us, things that we can relate to.
Nice.
And when I'm on socials, or when I'm writing, when I was writing Mud to Millions, when we're writing these newsletters, they are designed to reach us in ways that we can understand, in ways that we can relate to. Because the reality is, most of us watch, CNBC or MSNBC, we watch, these financial publications, and it doesn't click for us, because it's like, well, I don't even know what the hell you're talking about. Sometimes I'm looking at these things like, what the hell are you talking about? So I want to make sure that it's ways that we can understand, because I think that the information that we need has been so gatekept from us. And my role, or how I see myself in this space, is just making sure that it's broken down in ways that we can understand, because it doesn't have to be as complicated as people try to make it.
That's very similar. I thought the way, and I feel the same way even just about tech. I think we've tried to make it this very complicated aspect, and now you're seeing folks use certifications to go and land 6-figure jobs, or even just starting in spaces even just from help support, or help desk support. That's an entry level. My grandfather started off working as an aircraft technician at Boeing, and continued to work his way up. And we can't kind of we can't look at small beginnings as not the big pot, because we've glamorized these big, large positions or opportunities, in our efforts to demonstrate how much we're getting a bag. But sometimes those small beginnings really get us to those next level. And, to your point, I had launched and released Upper Hand, again, the future of work for the rest of us. And I tried to condense every single chapter specifically on strategies, letting here are the jobs of the future, here's what they require, here are the salaries. Because no one is sharing that information just on a very basic level. And here are the exercises and the conversations you can have with your family. So you can literally understand what it is, why it matters. Here are some other folks who look like you, who come from communities that you've come from, that are doing it. And I think that we just have not had these conversations about money, or even the future of jobs, at a level that the mass population can truly grasp. We've made it so esoteric and so you got to have a university master's degree to understand. When I love the way that you've broken things down, and to that point around creating information for people that look like you or come from environments that you come from. You speak so lovingly about Philly, and from the outside looking in, Philly is almost a microcosm of some of the most unique challenges that majority Black cities have had, from education to health outcomes to disinvestment to housing to poverty, all of these kinds of things. But why do you still focus so much on Philly? Why is Philly, or how has Philly really shaped even just your experience, and why you're
Philly is always going to be home, right? My grandmother grew up in Philly. My mom grew up in Philly. Philly will always be Philly will always be home for me. You know, no matter where I am in the world, I will always have a place to go to in Philly. And the reality is, wherever my mom is home in my heart, and I don't think my mom's ever leaving Philly. So I get Philly's story, right? You know, I get all the reasons why Philly is in the position that it's in. And I've got so many frustrations about how little investment has gone into Philly, how leadership has not focused on the right things, right? They haven't focused on making sure that kids growing up had community resources or had training for jobs that could pay them a lot of money, right? Like Philly didn't focus enough on skills. They took trades positions out of schools, right? You know, when I think about how much my master plumber makes or how much my carpenters make, and we just don't have those skills. Like they didn't go to college. They didn't have to go to college. They didn't have to be burdened with student debt, and we just don't have those skills. You know, now also it's really important to me, being from Philly and seeing the position and the conditions that my city's in. It's important to me to make sure that I'm a part of not only improvement of the city, but also making sure that Philadelphians can still afford to live there, right? So, you know, it was important to me, if I go into a community, you know, I can't displace people who grew up in those communities by doubling and tripling rents. Now, granted, you know, I'm also an investor, so I got to make sure that the investments that I'm making are profitable, right? I'm not a nonprofit, and I'm not your president, so it's not my job to house people for free or at a loss to me. But I also think it's extremely important to not bleed every rock dry with, you know, I can, you know, with profits that I can get, or increasing rents substantially. Most of my rents are either, you know, at or slightly below market rents, simply because I can afford to do so, right? And because of some of the things that some of the things that I did for my financial picture, I can benefit my community that way, which is again why I talk so much about the priority being, you know, working on yourself as a priority, and then family, and then community. I'm in a position to be able to empower and benefit my community because I already took care of securing my own mask first.
I love that. I love that so much. And even in terms of this concept of securing your own mask first, and I think that's even something I'm kind of unlearning, the service before ensuring the foundation even of myself and my family is secure. Right now we're in such a tumultuous time. We've had so many, our entire lives have changed, and you know, from the pandemic to continuing to witness the murder of Black folks in our streets, to eviction moratoriums, and you know, obviously now, you know, the wars, not just of course what's happening in Ukraine, but just around the world. There are so many different things pulling at our attention that are catastrophic in and of themselves. And I think that I'm having a hard time just grappling with, how do we stay focused on the present and build towards a future that is continuing to be uncertain, but how do you just stay focused? Like, how are you thinking about your moves, what that looks like in terms of the things that you're building, the way in which you're serving your community, both online and offline? How are you having those conversations with yourself or with others at this point?
You know, so one of the things, to answer your first question, how do I stay focused? I try to limit a lot of information that's out there that would get me off focus, right? You know, I try to be very strategic and intentional about what my timeline looks like. You know, I don't follow a lot of political pundit pages. I don't look at a lot of news. I mean, that stuff can really weigh you heavily. Even when we're going through a lot of crisis like we are right now and have been for the last 2 years, you know, I can find myself like doom scrolling on Twitter. So I try to be very, you know, what my feed to make sure that it keeps me focused on what's important to me and what I value. I've also used this time during the pandemic, which has been extremely challenging for all of us, to find a little bit more balance in my life. I tweeted, I think it was like December of 2019, I tweeted something that someone recently reposted in my stories, and it was my tweet about my early 20s. I basically sacrificed them. I worked 60 to 80 hours a week, and now I'm at a point in my 40s where I can essentially do about what I want. So that for me, although that got a lot of criticism, that for me was balance, right? Work hard early, play hard forever, right? And that's kind of what my life looks like now. So for me, during this time of war, of pandemic, of George Floyd stories and similar, I've tried to find more balance in what gives me peace. I've probably worked less in the last, I'd say, 2 years than I have my entire professional career. And I've really spent some time focusing on what's important to me. I've spent a lot of family time. My mom was here with me in Cali for about a month, and I got to just spend like a month with her. We retired my mom in this last summer of 2021. So that's what keeps me focused right now. Finding, I've started collecting. I started collecting art about a year ago, and that's a huge, like, I love it. Things that I did. I'm like outside my house, like watering my ficus trees with a hand pitcher. I'm finding joy in just other things.
Yeah. And you share that joy with us very publicly. Is there a reason why you've also decided to take us on like your home remodel journey, your art purchases, things like that? I feel like there's some of that joy that you're sharing with us publicly. And I'll say too, just as a Black woman, it's been really great to watch another Black woman who has created a life for themselves that has so many nuances. So I was wondering, is that
it's extremely intentional? And I'm somewhat a private person. Like if you notice, like I talk a lot about money and you'll see things around my house, but I don't really talk about my personal life very much. So it is extremely intentional that I'm showing what I show in my personal life, because you have no idea how many messages I get. Some I share, a lot I don't, on people seeing someone who looks like them, giving them dreams that they never even knew they had, right? Which is just extremely, that's just fucking dope to me, right? Like to basically have someone who like, I never saw someone like, a Black woman living like this. And I never, in a way that, I try to make sure, of course, that the things that I'm showing, people know is attainable. Like I'm not in a $10 million house. I'm not in a, we look at Oprah, and I love Oprah. But trying to get to Montecito or Santa Barbara, wherever she is, that's a, listen.
She has a tea room. Like there's a whole section for tea and books. And I'm
listen. There's levels to this, right? Like there's levels to this. I'm not like. So I want to, before you get to that level, I'm the level before you get to that level. So I want to give the aspiration that's like the, low hanging fruit. You can get here. If I can get here, you can get here. And then y'all shoot past me and go to open level. So that's why I show what I show.
I also just love that you do have this publicly private life. You talked to us about, where you grew up, how you grew up. And as I think about the sort of next steps for folks who are for the first time branching out in their families, whether it's going to college or getting some levels of certification or becoming an investor for the first time, in kind of being like the oddball in their family. Like I'm the oddball in my family. I'm the only entrepreneur in my family. And knowing how challenging that is when you do come from an environment where everyone kind of thinks one way and that there's kind of this safe route to success, right? And it may not be a high level success, but it keeps you safe. It keeps your bills paid. You might get your one vacation a year, and maybe that's about it. Can you talk to us about how you have maybe even just inspired your family? You know, what was it even like for you in the early stages as you were like, you know, becoming a stockbroker, going into all these spaces, you know, that had to be kind of tough to, again, not only be the only one in the room in your environment, but maybe even just in your immediate circle of relatives doing something completely to the left.
It's funny because no one who knows me, like none of my family, none of them are surprised that like I did what I did. Like, I mean, I was literally a child who would take her allowance, not spend it, put it in a shoebox and slide it under my bed until I was then old enough to get like, we had a PSFS bank account, like a passbook savings account. And I would like watch my balance and I'd like, you know, just kind of like make sure it was increased like that. So no one's surprised at, you know, this money hoarding child became a financial advisor.
I love that. I loved reading that in Led to Millions, and I felt so convicted because I was like, I was the kid that would have given my money to the kid who spent all his money on his first day of the trip.
Listen, I was so mad that kid spent all his damn money. I was like, you got to be kidding me. So for, you know, for me, you know, I'm always in my circle. You know, that's my zone. So it's been kind of cool helping, you know, my mom with her retirement planning, right? You know, so making sure that her retirement accounts were allocated accordingly. And it was important to me because I'm like, you know, if her retirement accounts ain't allocated appropriately, I don't have the 100% of supporter. So I need her money doing well. And so, and the same with other members of my family. It's interesting because early on when you're doing it, people are just kind of watching you. You know, you may even have some naysayers, but when you prove it, that's when people, you know, oh well, all right. So can you talk to me about, you know, I noticed there was like a distinct shift when I like right around the time I was like probably late 20s, early 30s when, you know, when I was buying multiple properties and I was really like all the work that I've been doing started to pay off. People then started coming to me seriously. Family members, friends started coming to me seriously. Like, okay, like here's what I've got. Can you show me how to reallocate my retirement plan, or can you sit down and help me budget? So again, that's why I also think it's important for the priority self family, which also includes friends, anyone who's in your inner network community, because sometimes it takes family and community a while to see you do it, to see success and to see results. So if you can, like, you know, figure it out, focus and figure out a strategy that works for you, and then show them how as well. And that to me is the important piece. Like I don't say, you know, the priority is self,
right.
And that's it. The priority is still very much family and community, because if you're the only person who is doing well financially, that's a very lonely place to be. And, you know, if you don't have others who are around you who look like you that are in your circle or can travel in your circles, you know, I don't know, maybe some people get off on that, but that's pretty miserable for me.
Well, it's kind of that only person that looks like you in the room theory too, where you know, if you're the only one doing well, you're the only rich person, as Jay said, you know, like that's not success.
Yeah.
If you're not going back. Yeah. And that's my thing. I love that you use your platforms to teach. I love that you have this newsletter. How can people sign up for?
It's on my site. If you go to Instagram or Twitter, it's the link in my bio. If you don't go there, the direct website is sos.ayeshaseldon.com. You can sign up for the newsletter. It's pretty dope, and we're now midway through. Number 5 drops this week. We're now midway through the 10 Stat Commandments, which is pretty darn dope. We've recently added like just stay in the know, like what's happening. Just, you know, sometimes we don't have those friends who talk about like relevant financial things. So at the bottom of our newsletter, we recently added just things that you should know about what's happening. In a lot of our circles, a lot of our community, no one's talking about, well, Google just did a 20-for-1 split, or how does the war impact the stock market or the crypto market. I really want that to be a very quick, fast read once a week, to kind of frame your week and how you should focus to get started for the week.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that. Ayesha, I just want to thank you for the time. And every time you've let me harass you in my effort to get you to adopt me one of these days. But I appreciate it. Thank you for everyone who has joined the live. Please, again, make sure you get to Ayesha's link in bio to sign up for the newsletter that drops every single Sunday. I believe I'm on the list. I know I'm on some list. So I need to make sure I'm getting that. And also pick up Mud to Millions. I got a chance to read that last year, and it completely was just part of my whole financial literature and just constant learning of, how can I do this better? How can I ensure my survival, my family's survival, my community's survival? And also make sure to grab a copy of my book, Upper Hand, The Future of Work for the Rest of Us. I specifically talk about getting into tech, in the significance of us. Once we get in there, how do we negotiate these stock options? How do we negotiate all these opportunities that come our way so that we are stewarding our resources as best as possible? Ayesha, again, just always grateful. Thank you so much.
Likewise, thank you so much for having me. Thank you all for joining.
Of course. Yes, thank you for everyone for joining.
Bye.
Chat with y'all soon. Take care.